Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. We'll just go ahead and jump into those questions. Jason, what do we have?
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas writes in, what is vignetting in photography?
Go ahead, Jesse.
So lenses aren't perfect, and as you get to the edge of a lens, you'll start to see more of these imperfections. You might see the colors kind of, not being aligned perfectly, and you might see some roll off on the brightness of your image. And that's exactly what vignetting is. I do have a tiny little demonstration of what it looks like. I don't have enough imperfect lenses anymore, so everything I take is pretty much free from vignette. But what it'll end up doing is bringing down the edges of your frame, bringing down the brightness of the edges of your frame. This was kind of useful because as you can see, it draws attention to the center of the frame. So there was a bit of a benefit to having a bit of vignetting, and now all photo editing software has that vignetting function, as it just kind of draws your eye to the subject. And as lenses get more and more perfect, not perfect, but as they get closer to perfect, some people like that retro look of older lenses that had more imperfect edges, so they might lean into that vignetting a little bit more for the retro vibes.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, vignetting is when anything abnormal occludes edges of the frame. This can happen from a number of places. I face it all the time in setting up teleprompters, because if the shroud of the teleprompter or the hood of the teleprompter is too far out, it starts to cut into the outside edge of the frame, so you have to move it back. That could be called vignetting. And as Jesse just said, also where you have a lens that isn't a very good lens, or even a lens that is designed for a different type of field size camera. So if you're using an EF lens on a micro four thirds that's not designed for micro four thirds sensor, it can vignette because the area of focus and the area of exposure may not go all the way to the edge of the sensor, and so you can either see defocusing, or you can actually see darkening toward the edges of the film of the frame. So a lot of times you'll see sometimes in old movies, where they had a wrong lens on, or a special lens that they like to use, a super wide angle lens, but the image size didn't quite cover the film frame, and so you'll see little dark corners at the edges. So it can also be used if there's a French flag or something on top of the camera and it's dipping into the frame a little bit. That can be called vignetting. And it can also have to do with chromatic aberration, so that a lens is sharpest in focus on all the colors at the center, but at the edges there's deviations in where the red, blue, and green land, so you'll see some color fringing around the edge. And in olden days, they used to have actresses, they used to put a clear filter in front of the camera and spread Vaseline around the edges to give it that dreamy look for those dream sequences.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised at how much vignetting is used in color correction, or in that final pass. There is a lot of it just very, very subtly added, and you don't notice it until it's gone. So a lot of stuff that when you're watching a film, a lot of times there is a little bit of darkening that goes along around those edges, or around certain parts to kind of keep you focused on the people that they want you to keep you focused on. So that is, it's used in a very subtle way beyond a lot of the mechanics. Next question.
Funsuk Dorje in Dharamsala, India writes in, hi panelists, how do you protect SDI connectors from damage? I recently found pins broken from 2 of my long cables.
Courtney?
Well, if the center pins are broken, it's from trying to jam them in when they're misaligned. So that's a bad thing. It's hard to break the pin in the inside just from stepping on a connector or banging it around. But another problem can be if you're using a trumpeter tool to go in and remove if you've got a tight field of SDI connectors, let's say, and you've got all your B and C's in there right next to each other and you can't get your fingers in. The trumpeter tool looks like a screwdriver with about a 6-inch or 8-inch shaft on it and a little collar that goes around the B and C collar. And you grab it with that and twist it. But being that you're on the end of 12 inches of leverage, it's easy to, once you start to pull it out, to go off angle, and that'll bend the pin. and then next time you try and insert it, it's not going to go in, and you'll try and force it. I make these. I 3D print these little collars to make mine easier to get out. And I can put them on any BNC connector without having to take the connector off or put a new connector on it, like the rear twist that Alex is so in favor of. But this allows me to get a handle on them and have much more leverage to twist them out and push them in. And I can heat these up, slide it over the BNC collar. When they cool off, they shrink down, and then I have a nice handle to turn the back of those BNC connectors. And it's also, since it's TPU, it's urethane, it protects the collar from getting, if it's stepped on a little bit, it gives it a lot of shock when you slam those connectors down onto the concrete.
Good, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say training. You got to teach whoever's doing that to run cables properly and be careful with them, because it is a tiny pin, but you really got to ask how did they do that even? Because if you are really trying, you can do it. But I want to get one of these things, which is a let me see. A barrel adapter, which you should have anyway, just to extend a cable, and toss that on the end. It'll be like your sacrificial little piece of metal that if something happens to that, at least you're not having to recut and put on a new end piece because somebody damaged it. But having the tools and having the extras available to be able to do that would be where I would live to, having everything available.
Yeah, I think that I have, thousands of cables, and I can think of maybe losing one or two pins ever. It's really not it's a very uncommon thing to have happen. Where we see it is when people are trying to, the most common place for that pin problem to happen, because the pin is a separate piece, right? The pin is being crimped into onto that center section, is when it's plugged into something that's corroded. So a corroded SDI, or BNC connector will hang on to that pin, and you can theoretically pull it out or bend it, pulling it out. But we were plugging something into something very old that was at sea level, near the sea, and so there was definitely some salt corrosion in there that we didn't notice when the guys were putting together. I wasn't actually there, but it was explained to me what happened there. And so you want to be careful of corrosion. You want to be careful of what we call gentle hands. One of the things that we train people on and would let people go for is slamming things down on the table and moving and jamming things into the thing. We definitely try to keep people from doing that because it shortens the life of everything, the cables, but also more importantly, all the equipment. So being just, that last little bit doesn't have to be rough, and people get into a rush, fast is slow and slow is fast, and so you just finish what you need to do. And so, rough hands oftentimes cause a lot of damage to a lot of these things. I do agree with everything that's said before. Having the ability to terminate on site is really important. It can be not particularly expensive. You can get a little thumb-oriented, stripper that will basically, you can cut all the parts of the insulation out and restrip it. And the first couple of times you're going to make a big mess, and getting them tuned just the right for your cable takes a little bit of time. But once you have it figured out on how to on where those things are, it takes a good person maybe it takes me about 2 or 3 minutes to re-terminate something. But when people who do a lot more of it than me can do it in usually a minute, to drop a new end in, and so then you can just fix it. As I said, as Courtney pointed out, I'm a strong proponent of the Neutrik rear twists because I can color code them the same way that Courtney does with printing, but they're also just easier to do, and they tend to cause less damage just because people can grab onto them without too much trouble. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Most of my BNC connectors damage is not the pin. It's these internal, if you look at the BNC connector, these little fins that surround this center set, one of those will get bent. And
right. No, I agree. That's most of the time. I'm saying that
fail.
The only time we've ever seen the pins is when we saw corrosion. I'm just saying it's very rare. You're right that those little areas around the edge are the things that,
one of those gets bent, and then you can't get it in unless you straighten it out, and you have to get it in at an angle and then tilt it up to bend it back in. And Yeah.
Well, and the number one way an BNC cable gets damaged is is that it gets run over by a
it gets stepped
forklift.
on and
like
rolled over with something with
it's
steel
something in the
wheels.
middle. Yeah, and then it becomes a series of patch cables instead of the 100-foot cable that you had before. So anyway, those are those. And let's see. David Brady said center pin should not extend beyond the BNC connector. Good thing is SDI cables can be re-terminated. He said the same thing there. You lose a couple inches. Robert Lickram says that I utilize Neutrix cap cup rubbery device that has holes to thread a string and tie ends to the BNC. I've never seen that before. Redco, I believe, has a vendor. I mainly use these to keep dust bunnies out of the connector before and after I use the cable. And Mickey said, find the electrician's scissors. I find that electrician scissors allow me to strip and prep cables for termination more easily, faster, and more accurately than dedicated coax strippers. I think Mickey has done that a lot because I looked at that. I was like, no, I would not try that. but I understand where Mickey's coming from. But you'd have to be very good at it to do it that way. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada writes in, somehow I lost the link to my music in the Sources tab at the top left in Final Cut, and I can't seem to find out how to restore it. Is there a setting I'm not seeing or some way to relink it?
I couldn't find it. So, I looked, at my, it's what he's talking about, I think, is right up here, is being able to, pick out music here to bring it into your thing. Now, I admit I had to figure out where it was because I don't use the music tab ever. So, or that tab. I've literally never used that tab. I've used Final Cut since 0.9. So, and the reason for that is that if I'm going to use music or I'm going to use sources, I usually have folders somewhere that I'm putting the music or the sources into, because I've conformed them, I've prepped them, I've done whatever, and then I'm going to bring them in. And so I'm always bringing sources because I was trying to figure out, what is he talking about? Where is the source? I think it's very convenient that they put photos and music in Apple TV. I don't know how that would be a source. Anyway, so but they have all of those sources there, but I've never used them because I put them in folders, in my project folders, before I bring them into my resources. So I would recommend using that. I would recommend going down that path so you've conformed everything properly. I have no idea how to I couldn't get it to go away, so I don't know how to bring it back. So my knee jerk would be to uninstall and reinstall. I don't know if you've done that or not. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, Quincy Jones passed away on Sunday, November 3rd. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I used to work with Quincy on many occasions. I worked with a crew that would work with his publicist whenever he had to create a short video of apologies for he'd be invited to all over the world to all these different events, and he couldn't go to all of them, so he'd have to create a little video that would go out and apologize for not being there. And so we would go to his house up in Bel Air, a beautiful house sitting on top of a hill with great views, and it was round shape and had these round balconies. And a great guy, he would come out, and me being probably the oldest guy on the crew, he would reminisce, and he'd say, "You're old enough, you probably remember this," and go off into a story. and in order to shoot a little, 40-second piece, it would take us about 3 hours, because Quincy would go off on these stories, these incredible stories about, well, I was in Beirut back in, in 62, and, and it was just amazing, just Grammy Awards on every shelf, everywhere you could look, and a great guy. And it'd take us a long time. He would constantly rewrite the little piece. Well, this reminds me of a time. Well, put that in there, and so I'd have to type all of the changes in at the last minute. So he was a great guy and quite a world traveler, and had his fingers in a whole lot of stuff that nobody, produced movies, wrote soundtracks for movies you wouldn't even believe he wrote soundtracks for, and besides, producing Michael Jackson and doing a lot of Frank Sinatra, conducting the orchestra for them, and doing the We Are the World stuff, just had his hand in a whole lot of stuff.
Next question.
Juancy Robles in Mexico City, Mexico writes in, is there a difference in how YouTube treats videos, shortcuts, and live content for views and ad revenue?
Jesse?
Absolutely, yes. And I am really hesitant to describe any of the nuance of how it handles it because two reasons. The first is that it changes frequently, like the number of views or hours watched that you need to have on your channel to be eligible for ad revenue can change. And the other reason is it's really boring. Like it's just a spreadsheet of requirements that you have on your channel, and then as you post, to be eligible, and then as you continue to post from there, how what percentage of what views of how long it's always changing and it's always very boring, and you just have to kind of keep an eye on the spreadsheet or forget about it completely and just make content for the fun of making content.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that what Jesse just said there at the very end is that you just kind of have to figure out not so much how the ad revenue works, but really what you're using each one of those for. In general, videos are the best thing to drive subscriptions. So that's how you're going to get the most number of subscribers. Shortcuts are a great way to get reach. So to have people know that you're there. So a lot of times, people look at shortcuts like, oh, that's going to drive a bunch of subscribers, but it doesn't. Shortcuts really have people know that your channel's there. They come to your channel, they see the videos, they then watch those videos, and then the live tends to build a deeper relationship with your most committed folks. So that tends to be tends to be how those are used. Then the ad revenue follows lots of viewers. I wouldn't worry about it. You're not going to make a lot of money on the live content until it becomes VOD. The videos are generally going to generate the most amount of revenue for you, but you have to make them. I think a lot of people it's a challenge to make good videos that people want to watch. We see handfuls of very bad videos, and we go, well, they got 1 million views, but they hit some vertical that made sense. But for the most part, you have to make if you watch YouTubers actually make YouTube content, it's an enormous amount of work. Watch a little bit of the behind the scenes of a great video. I was watching one on I want to get into screen printing because I've been wanting to do that for like 20 years. Just single color, like fun T-shirts kind of thing. Nothing. I don't want to get into a business of it, and it's been something I've always been fascinated by. When I was in Zimbabwe, they were printing. They screen print all the posters. All the concert posters, and I happened to be in that press, and it was just unbelievable. These incredible, I would call them artists. How fast they worked and how amazing the registration was and how cool the posters were and everything else. And I was just like, oh, I got to do this. That was 24 years ago. so I'm close. I'm getting closer to the surface. I may take a class sometime. My kids are now old enough that they thought it'd be fun to make T-shirts for school. And so we'll see. But anyway, what I was going to say is that I watched his video. It was like, I Like to Make Things, I think is a great channel, by the way. And he has really clean videos about how he did stuff. And at the very end, he'll show behind the scenes, and you'll see how many outtakes there are. And you realize, it's not like he just put up a camera and recorded. There's people there, and there's things, and there's repeats, and all that stuff. So that's the thing you have to kind of take into account as well. Next question.
Gary Lund in McKinney, Texas writes in, what happened to extra hours? Did I miss it?
My fault. Kind of my fault. So we had a technical issue, and then the reason you don't know about it is my fault. I told Grant, of course, I'll send out an announcement, and the difference between when I said that is 4 hours of meetings, and I just forgot. So we needed to put an announcement out. We just had some technical stuff on the back end that we couldn't set it up. It probably won't happen again. We'll put some. No, it's still in that start phase of getting things off the ground. So we just need to kind of manage some stuff on our end to make that not happen. But I apologize. It was my fault that we didn't send out an announcement that said it wasn't going to happen. But we knew earlier in the day that we weren't going to be able to make it work. So it just happened to hit a sliver where someone wasn't available, and we weren't. I didn't have anybody else available to turn it on because we are. Own I Know is breaking down our office once again. Unfortunately, it's a very small breakdown, but it's still breaking it down. So they're closing up that office. We keep on. I think we have a curse that we show up and then there's a certain time frame that everyone's got until it's too late. So anyway, but we're not. So we were in the middle of all of that when this happened, and it wasn't something that Kevin could just sit down and do. So anyway, we should have that sorted out in the future. Next question.
Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota writes in, there were a couple of programs mentioned for loading programs for new installations a while back. Does anyone remember what these were or which Office Hours episode it was?
Go ahead, Jason.
It was a Friday show, and I think what you were looking at for were Ninite.com and the PowerShell script, so Windows 10 debloater.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that's a hit. I think Ninite was the one, or Ninite, however you want to pronounce it, which is a program that I think this is PC only. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's a Mac version of it. But you just check off all the apps you want. It creates a script that will go out and find all of these programs. And so when you start up a new machine, when you're setting up a new machine, you just run this script and it will download all the free programs that you want, or the ones that you have licensed to, and install them in one fell swoop.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia writes in, my Bumblebee in-ear monitors are only working in the right ear. Can they be repaired?
I would look at making sure that it's not the connector, but if it's not, if it's actually in the ear thing, I think that it will be very hard to get it repaired. So, Mickey says it depends on where the fault is. You may be able to re-terminate it if it's the break in the cable or a busted connector. Alternatively, you can get a replacement cable. Email Bumblebee Industries, and I would agree with Mickey that talking to Bumblebee about it is probably the way to go. If it's in the upper ear area, I don't know if it's going to be more expensive just to have them fix it. But if it's somewhere in the cable, or if it's in the connector, I think that you may have an opportunity to get it fixed. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I would if you can take apart, if it's not a molded connector the way it plugs in, not anywhere near the earpiece. Check there. If that's where the fault is, then you could fix it, put a new connector on it. But anything else, unless you are good at microsurgery, no, I wouldn't suggest trying to repair.
And it's Bumblebee. I think maybe I said Bumblebee. So it's Bumblebee is the Bumblebee Industries. No M. I will admit that the fragileness of them is one of the reasons that I stopped using them every day. So I do use them for some low profile stuff. So I have them here and I use them, but I don't use them every day because they're a little more tweaky to put in my ears. It's much easier to put these linsoles in, and the linsoles do break, but they're just less expensive. so that's I just go, we'll get another pair. Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas writes in, comment on the newly released MinisForm UM680 and UM870 as small PCs for integration in your social media production workflow. Is there a better deal than these?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it depends on exactly what you want to do with them. We're testing the bigger brothers to these that have Intel chips. So note that these are AMD chips. And when you're looking at the price of that, you want to make sure that you're clicking that it includes the OS, RAM, and a hard drive, because the bare bones unit is the inexpensive one, which down here you can see that the AMD Ryzen 7, this is the 680 that Paul's alluding to, but it's bare bones, no OS, CPU, or SSD. So once you add those, it jumps up to $335. And for that, B-Link by Courtney might be a better deal once you apply the coupon to that. But the ones that we're testing right now, I just got 2 of the ATEMs from MinisForm, and I just ran this test. This is the actual machine. This is about an $850 computer, and it's got the Intel Arc card. So if you want a GPU and something with a lot more cores, so this one has 16 cores. That other one that you linked to, I think, has 6. So depending if you want to do like vMix or something like that requires a GPU, this unit that's called the ATEM Man, that's $850 compared to like even a bigger AMD.
And are you trying to show? Are you showing that guy, or are you just talking to it?
Sorry, I didn't cut over. Yeah, here we go. The 16 core machine called the ATEM Man, also by MinisForm, is scoring at 1019, which is just it's super fast. So if you're doing any kind of media production, I would say look at some of the more expensive models. So if you're just using it like a terminal type machine for controlling other machines, or if you're using it for basic NDI monitoring or something like that, then a $300 computer will get you there. But if you want something that you're going to actually be cutting and loading graphics and doing playouts and more intensive things and multiple items, then I would definitely look at the stronger models.
Good, Courtney.
It really depends on what your use is going to be. Like Guy was saying, that these Ryzen 7 based machines, like the 680 and 760, are they're 6-core, 12 threads. So Zoom is not going to prevent you from using 1080p because the core count is too low. It'll run up to 5 gigahertz in turbo mode, and you can get them for a little over $300. Which is about half the price of the new Mac Minis, the small Mac Minis. And this is about the same size as the new small Mac Minis, maybe about a half inch shorter on the square dimensions. And it comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte SSD and NVMe, and that's RAM that you can actually replace inside there. There's sticks of RAM, and I think a M2 NVMe 2280 drive in there, so you can go up to 4 terabytes if you want. But for a 1 terabyte, 16 gig is $335, and this has, I think it has a 5 gigabit Ethernet port on it, so that's good. So you can get high-speed Ethernet, and I think you have dual-band Wi-Fi as well. So pretty capable. Has a low noise fan to keep heat at bay, to keep it from throttling down. And let's see, 6 cores, 12 threads. The one that Guy was speaking of has a much better GPU. So if you're going to do like any graphics rendering or anything like that, that might be better. But if you're just using it for social media or Zoom calls, this one can certainly do the job, and it'll power. It has a HDMI display port and a USB-C port that has display port capability, so you can power 3 4K monitors off of this one little computer for $330.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I wanted to show the image of the one that we bought 3 of so far. So we've been buying these ones called the ATEM Man. And the interesting thing about these ones is not only does it have an Intel Arc inside, so when I say it's $849, that's with the 32 gigs of RAM, but you can also add this eGPU dock for $50, which now you can throw in a full-size 4080 or 4090 later on should you decide to turn this thing into a screamer. So be aware of your upgrade path. You know, they are NUCs and they are small form factor, but you can't really shove a graphics card in there unless you get something. You have that. It's called a OcuLink port. So that's something unique to some of these manufacturers, is these different ports to be able to put PCIe cards in there. But this is definitely the one that I'd be looking at. You're seeing it running here in my splash top. That was this machine here, and we're using it for NDI bridge. And I've pushed a bunch of feeds through this machine. So something cool to look at, the ATEM Man for $850.
And what are you using the NDI bridge for?
A bunch of PTZ cameras that are going in government places. So basically the bridge can drop on site, and then those NDI feeds can be shared, and remote operators can control all those cameras with the bridge. So we have a host machine that's here, so that my IP address is the one that pops the ports open, and then this second machine joins, and now anybody else who joins doesn't have to open up any ports. It's only the host that has to open up the ports, and now we got full control. We've got the ability to even use one of these at the far end, so you could just use a joystick like this to control pan, tilt, and zoom, and then presets and focus.
That's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Next question.
Alex Lindsay in Novato, California writes in, I have a new camera rig if people are interested.
So I'm working on this camera rig. It's not done yet. It's still messy. So I'm just letting you know that it'll get cleaned up a little bit. So this is what it looks like right now. So this is kind of the next iteration of what we did, or another iteration of what we did. And now I'm going to clean up a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff sitting up here right now because I didn't know where to put it yet. so I just kind of put it up there so that I could wire it. But what we have here is, in this case, if I can show you the back here, it's kind of hard to see because it's behind, well, I guess I don't have the battery on it right now. So this is a Ranger on the back here, and then there's another Ranger up here. So this goes out, this comes back in, and then so those are the Teradek Rangers that can do, they can do the 4K 60 HDR out. So they are set up there, and then I have at the top here, and again these are going to go into the back to make it cleaner. I'm talking to you, Mickey. Anyway, these are going to go in the back here or in the front to manage weight, but these are a de-embedder and then also this de-embedder feeds into a IFB transmitter, so that you can have basically what you can do is this is that two-way thing, so you can actually have a Zoom connection, and then of course we're using an FX6 to make that work. So I'm going to put this down for a second because it's unwieldy at the moment.
So is this going to be the next version of what we use at NAB next year? I'm guessing you're just iterating.
Well, hopefully we'll get to use it earlier than next NAB. I'm about a week away. So I sent a Prism, which should get to John today. But we had to. It took a little while for me to get the prisms talking to each other in the way that I wanted them to, and figure those bits and pieces out. So we've got there'll be a prism that will get in there. So basically, what we can do is with an internet connection, the goal is to not be as contained as we were before. So we're still going to use Zoom, but Zoom is sending out to the camera, but the prism is sending back to Detroit. And what that means is that we should be able to cut 4K 60, theoretically HDR, in the show.
And we're not limited to the site. We're not going back to the site to our booth.
Well, we're not limited. Well, you still need somewhere to get internet. But what we would do is, but in this case, we wouldn't be using Zoom as the return. We're using the Prism as a return, to make that actually work. Now, the Prism can go both directions, and so we're going to try to play with that as well. So I know this will sound complicated, but the panelists are in Zoom. The panelists are talking, but the prisms are talking to each other and sending the panelists back to us and us back to the panel. So it's a pretty simple. So what I'm working on is having a Starlink that could be somewhere. And then you have the prism on the Starlink, and then you connect it. Now, there may be some more latency than what we've had with wired connections and so on and so forth. So that's part of what we're testing. But if we found an internet connection, we think that we can get the prisms down to hundreds of milliseconds. And so it should be just a little bit more than Zoom than what we have right now. And it could theoretically then deliver, rather than something in Zoom coming back to the show, it can deliver a very high quality video. Zoom is high quality, but this is 4K 60, potentially it's 10-bit 4K 60 coming back. Now, which we could do also with the live view. The live view just has more latency. So this kit wouldn't probably be as comfortable to do two-way. It would be if we have a code. The goal is to get rid of the host, so the host on the far end, and there's a bunch of reasons to do that. One is it drives the person getting interviewed to look right at the camera. So, they look straight in the camera. And I found in NAB, once I got used to that, it was really hard to go back to watching people do this. It just really is something that's really being able to talk directly to the person. It means that when they're showing things, especially if you're going to an expo, Courtney, your mic's open. When you're going to an expo or a farmer's market or whatever you want to show, when someone sees the screen, because there's a screen on the front there, they're showing it to them. They're showing it to the people that they see it there, and I find that to be a much better experience for the viewer. It also means that the panelists aren't trying to say, ask them this and ask them that. They're just asking them, and I think that direct connection, and I think that, it allows experts to come in from anywhere in the world. You're not limited to what that person on the ground knew to ask. You have people able to kind of freeform it. And so I felt like the NAB solution was really a great solution to make that work. But of course the hardware there was even more aggressive than this hardware. So this one is it's still a beefy system. I mean, these are Teradek Rangers, that are going back and forth. So they have a lot of range, potentially line of sight 5,000 feet. But I think that if we got a couple hundred feet, we'd be pretty happy with it. So we'll start testing in the field hopefully soon. But it's a pretty fun kit, and I think that again, it's bringing a different kind of experience to the kind of going to expos and so on and so forth that we're hoping to use for NAB and possibly a bunch of other things next year. Go ahead, Courtney.
I had a question about the disembedder, and you didn't. Did you show what the monitor was for the return video that you're using? Can't you find a monitor that has a headphone out that you could use for disembedding the audio from the return signal?
It has a monitor out. We may use it. The hard part is really delivering. We found when we did when I tried to use the headphone out of the monitor, there was so many things that weren't working about it. Everything from gain to it not being clear to going into it.
Gain amplifier or something.
Yeah, it was so
DA.
So far it was just so wonky that I'd rather I'm not going to have it sticking out like that. Like I just did it. Yeah. What happened is that I put this one together looking at the photos of the last one. So I didn't I was like I'm not figuring out the layout right now. I'm just figuring out get things working. I want to. It's a little back heavy at the moment, so I think I can take the de-embedder and the headset. And there's some other advantages to having a de-embedder there because I could theoretically have multiple lines of IFB, if I wanted to, because the de-embedder has more granular control over that. And so there's that. But what happened is that I kept on fiddling. I tried to make it work with the headset. And I was just like, I got to stop doing this. I just, it was just.
It's one less thing you got to power, and one less thing that's.
It is. It was just that I will admit.
Cable to fail.
I will admit that I am. I will tend to not use headphone jacks in production. So headphone jacks to me are they're like something I review things on and something like that. I don't usually put headphone jacks in. I don't usually put unbalanced anything into my pipelines. It's a whole nother set of problems it's a whole nother set of variables that I don't like to deal with. So I will admit that's probably my personal dislike for that process. The Jack Cannon asked, how does the balance feel? I use a Tilta lightweight shoulder rig for the FX6. I'm using the small rig one. It's better than the Black Magic. So the Black Magic one. On it, yeah, it's got a little pad on it. It's got a shoulder pad, and I find it to be perfectly comfortable for me. And it's definitely better. I found that the Black Magic one was horribly uncomfortable. I just never really liked it. And this one, it's not just that it's got the whole, quick release assembly built into it as well. So it's very easy for me to set. I don't have the tripod here; it's in the shop, but it's really easy to set. To set it down and grab it, and all the pieces come apart. And I think that I know that small rig probably wouldn't last if I was using it every single day. I mean, it definitely feels like but I've been buying some of the newer pieces, which are much better than the older pieces as far as fit and finish. So it's worked pretty well for me. Jack, you also said you need a backpack for that shoulder rig to help out the operator. Yeah. We do hope to get one of the easy rigs, for it. That's another step. Right now I'm working on the transmission stuff. I may try to get a hold of an easy rig to do some of the testing there. I do think that an easy rig system would take this to another level. I know that, we were, so I think that will be another level of what we're doing here. Right now, I'm just trying to get the shoulder rig part to work. It's baby steps. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it'd be cool to have not only that, but also have the cart type solution as well. Because what happens is you want some big speakers to be able to hear the other side. And so I don't know what you have on there for speakers.
IFBs. So we just hand them an IFB. Yeah. So we gave there's an IFB transmitter there. So nice. we have three receivers. And so what we did for and this came down to time and everything else. The coils with the earpiece were back ordered. And so what I ordered was 50 disposable headsets, little that cost me $25 or whatever. And we would just hand a new one to everybody. I didn't bother to try
perfectly.
And they worked fine. What I'd probably do in the future would be to I have a bunch of audio implements. I have the receivers and everything else. And all I would do is just change out the coil for each person, or change out even just the little Christmas tree, which is what we call it, that you push it into someone's ear. And so you can buy 50 of those and you just swap them out as you go to different people. But yeah, the IFBs, we had a speaker on this one as a backup, and we used it a little bit, but we found that the speakers at NAB at least were not
You need some big
effective.
ones.
So what we did, the other thing is it created a lot more kind of cacophony at the space to have open speakers. And so we did it for like 1 or 2 booths and immediately moved to IFBs. And then after that, it was all IFBs. Because we thought it'd be easier. You can just walk up to someone and ask them a question. So I might build a speaker. My son 3D printed. He modeled and 3D printed holders for these speakers, so I can just slide them onto the front of that and then feed them audio, and that worked fine. So in fact, someone was I think Courtney, were you asking about the headset? We do use the headset from the monitor to that speaker, so that's how that speaker gets that speaker gets powered. And so anyway, so that it has a speaker option that is pretty. It's loud enough that if I made it any louder, I would annoy a lot of other people around me. I mean, you didn't think it was loud enough? It was not loud enough there?
Yours was not loud enough at all. Yeah,
okay.
Especially when you get into these really loud environments where there's other booths that are cranking stuff up. Yeah, especially if you go to a NAM, where NAM's just crazy loud. So even our speakers weren't big enough on this rig that we had. But the nice thing is that it's stable. And into day 3 is that, your operators can get really taxed. If you have operators, you can toss out and refresh, kind of like a soccer game or something. You got fresh legs. Go.
Well, and we were, this was definitely not part of a singular camera system either. So we had, this was mixed with the studio, the live view, and this, which I think are that kind of approach works pretty well. Is that you're not usually using them for longer than 10 or 15 minute hits. I think that's and now I do think that combined with the Easy Rig, I think an Easy Rig, for folks wondering, is it's a harness that goes onto you and it goes up over your head. You might have seen some of them, and they hang down, and you see them if you see behind the scenes at the NFL, you'll see the camera operators that are doing the end zone coverage. I think a lot of them have Easy Rigs. And with the Easy Rig, I think that you'd have a lot more time to wander around to make that actually work. And so I think that is definitely where we want to go with that process. I think that the thing that I liked about that I really liked about having the handheld operator was that we could move around a lot. Like we had a lot of the dexterity of what we were able to do was much higher than you've had some rolling ones. I've had some rolling runs, and there's a little bit more of coming up to it. And there's so much you could do. And this allowed us to, move a lot, have a lot more dexterity. And of course, there's a version of this in the future where I want to have 2 or 3 cameras that are all synced and coming back to the system, and at 4K 60, and able to do those things. But that's another.
That gives me an idea. I mean, I wonder if you can just have like a cart that follows along, where it's just a short hop to the cart. So you have an operator that,
and that's what we did.
Smaller rig, and then you hop to the cart just with a whatever wireless or whatever, so you're not tangled up. But then you also can have backup juice, because that's the thing that we found, is that we were running out of juice. So we had this EcoFlow that was, only at 50% after 8 hours. But that was the lesson learned after doing it for, show after show after show, that juice is key.
We did it with Cinegear 2 years ago, where that's exactly what we did. We had Courtney's battery, and we had Courtney's cart, and so we had so most the live view and all the transmitters and the mixer and everything else were all sitting on the cart, and then the 2 cameras were just very light. They were just doing their thing. What's different about this rig is the fact that there's a lot of two-way going on. So we have to get signal to the camera and get signal out of the camera at the same time. And so there's more gear there because it's there. Gary Lund asked, why not use bone conducting headsets? Because they don't work in loud environments. Like they just don't, they don't. I find the bone conducting, you have to push them up against your cheek to get them to, I use them constantly. Like I have bone conduction on like half the day, and they just don't work when it gets loud.
I found a good solution online. It's used, but for a speaker, you might go with this.
Yeah.
You just have to pry it off the top of that, the Blues Brothers car.
They're on a mission from God, mind you.
Exactly. So I think that this is, again, that we're going to tighten this up a little bit. We're going to do these tests and see how it looks. But I think that this is kind of another step towards this interactive element. I do think that once I saw it, once I saw the result of what we were doing, it's very hard for me to go back. I get really frustrated watching people interviewing people because I realized what we were getting out of it. When we did it at NAB, and if people go back and look at NAB, you'll kind of see that it was the Lindsay Optics, by the way. I literally went to their booth because they had the same last name. I mean, like literally, I didn't know anything about what they did. It was just like, it was kind of, it was one of the first two that we did in that. And when you have someone that, wasn't a 20-year-old talking straight into the camera, totally comfortable, showing things and totally interacting with the panel, I was like, oh, I'm done. Like this is so much better because now I have all these, content experts. We have 6 content experts able to ask questions directly, not through the moderator, not, somewhere else, but directly to that person. That person's looking directly back at them. It was very, very compelling. I also have a little small rig teleprompter that I haven't put on the rig yet, which I may experiment with later this week. So
that might break your eye line, though. I mean, that may actually take you a step back.
Maybe, because they'll be looking straight into it, and so they'll be looking straight at the thing. I just don't know if the visibility will work. Like, there's something about having what we did learn is that Lily gave us a big monitor that we used for half of the show, and it actually screwed up the eye line way worse. So the smaller window, it turns out 7 inches is 5 inches too small, 7 inch just right. 15 inch too big. so it was that one. So we're learning as we do it. So anyway, we'll give you more updates as we get a little closer to it. But we're really excited. The Teradek stuff is, I had not opened a Prism before, and wow, it just does encoding too. It's an amazing box, like just really, really cool box, that I hadn't gotten to play with before. It was like, what YouTube, like because it goes to Prism, but it'll also just go Prism to the internet. And so I was like, it just asked for my YouTube account. And I was like, oh, I can just hit stream. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, I see that iPadOS 18 supports external storage devices. For iPad-based production, could you conceivably save money by buying an iPad with lesser storage and an external drive for your projects?
I go with Jesse.
I think it's more likely that you're going to lose money on this strategy because you'll buy the minimal storage, and then in 3 to 6 months, you'll realize it's not nearly enough for what you want to do. Always just spend as much as you can on the internal storage when buying something like an iPad or a Mac computer. It plays out over the long term as not that expensive and absolutely worth it.
Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Cobox, BC writes in, is it possible to program my Edelkrone jib to trigger with a Stream Deck?
I don't know. The jib looks really cool. This is definitely on my list of things that I would like to play with, which is this jib here. And so here you have it. It's got, you've got a couple different things that you can do with their app. I just don't know what kind of external support they have for other, if there's anything they're supporting here. But what it does is there's a motor here, and you also have, and what's kind of cool here, you can see what they're doing is here, they're just kind of placing the camera where they want it, and then you can just save that, like that's what I want. So it's kind of it's an all-in-one little package that does pan, tilt, zoom, as well as move the arm, and then you can program it. I know some folks that really enjoy these, and I haven't been able to. I just haven't known the right person to get one yet to test because I don't have a mission for it yet. So we'll see. It looks cool, but I don't know if it has any external like OSC or REST or any other kind of interactions there. I'll try to reach out to them and find out. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York writes in, can the ATEM Mini Pro ISO USB-C port be used with a dongle for sending ISO records to an external hard drive and also be sending the signal to a computer for Zoom? I need to have both of these options up and running.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I would not do this. What I would try to do instead is split the HDMI out and feed one of those HDMIs into something that will get it into your computer and the other one to your monitor. If your HDMI is being reserved for the multi-view instead of program out, it might be time to consider the next model up, the Extreme, with two HDMIs out.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the Extreme, I think, has two USB outs, too. But I did ask, I didn't know the answer to this, so I asked the AI. And it says here, yes, you can use the ATEM Mini USB-C to feed a computer and do ISO recording through a hub. So I don't know if the AI man is right, but that's what he said.
I think the chances of that working stably is very low.
Yeah, you do have to make sure you get a USB 3.1.
Better have the best hub ever.
Yeah. You could try it. I think that you definitely want to think about OSC. Well, my brain just turned off there. But the
OWS.
OWC. I was like, as soon as I said OSC, I couldn't think of anything else. Like the shelf had been used, and I was like, what? It's not that. OWC. You want something pretty stable there to make that actually work. You can, as was mentioned before, the Extreme has two USB-Cs. That'll definitely work. When I do production, I have not done any paid productions with the HDMI version of the Extreme. So I have done some very small productions with the SDI version because I've got 4 outs. I find that the 2 outs is insufferable. The 2 outs, I can't think that way. So I find I fill the 4 outs all the time. After my last use of the SDI version, I don't know if I would use it again for that. I mean, I think that's the problem with these is that they work great as desk items. Is what I'm using them for. But the lack of outputs limits what you do pretty quickly. Limits what you can do in those things. So I would also think about the 1ME and 2ME constellations if you're going to upgrade. If you decide you're going to jump from the ATEM Pro, look at what you're doing, because having a lot more outs and a lot more outs makes a big difference. It will change. It just changes how you work. Very quickly. And if you're coming from a constellation, which is kind of where I came from, you feel like you're just tied like this. You feel like you're all just tied up because you're just used to using so many outputs. And so, if you're going to upgrade, I don't know if I would get it. I don't know if the Extremes I think are good for little desktop things. If you're doing something on site, I'd really look at the constellations. Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland writes in, we key out the lyrics at church for the live stream, currently white text on black from the main screen, so lumakey is easy. We want to add a background image to the main screen so lumakey won't work. Suggestions to get this to work?
It depends on what the background image is. There shouldn't be any reason why you can't key the white. If I'm trying to figure out why you're keying. If you're keying the white over top of some kind of background, you should be able to just key it. You'd still have the source be the text with, I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. I guess if you're putting a background image on the main screen behind the text, it just needs to be significantly darker than the white text. Lumakeys you can get pretty aggressive with. You really only need about 15% difference between the foreground and the background to key it. Especially text where it's got a hard edge to it. You need a little bit, or it gets really chunky. But you'll see aliasing if you push too hard. But you can do something where the color is. I mean, I get semi-transparent Lumakeys. So I can set the Lumakeys to a semi-transparent level. So I think that is, and then the other question is where are you getting the text from? Is it a web page? Is it what is generating that? One thing that I hadn't seen before this week was a program called WebLink, which is what I'm testing from Softron. It does a little bit like what Caspar does, except it's on a Mac. And you can grab any old web page and output it, and it'll use HTML5 alpha channels. It's kind of cool. Go ahead, Courtney.
Another thing you could do is make white text. Find an outline font for your text and make the outline about 2 or 3% above black gray. And that way, if you're going to put that text over a bright image in the background, you'll still see a gray outline around it. As long as you set the clip level to 100% black, then you can carry that dark gray as an outline around your white letters. So if you're putting it over a bright scene, let's say that you want to superimpose it over a bright scene, the white doesn't blend into any white in your background image because you got the gray outline to define it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, another easy cheat would just be use your super source if you have it and just use that background art template, load it into your back. I'm not sure what you're wanting to put there. That's kind of part of the disconnect.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, when I've been experimenting with Perplexity, I noticed that different LLMs can be more or less detailed in their output, even with the same prompt. Would that be a function of their context window?
Go, Jesse.
There's so much alchemy going on under the hood for each LLM that from prompt to prompt within one LLM, you'll get a huge variance in quality and detail and mood. That there would be conformity across the board is very unlikely. Like infinitesimal, you're more likely to shuffle a deck of cards back into new deck order than you are to get the same result from two different LLMs.
Next question.
Onel Mesa in Atlanta writes in, hi, I've been exploring 3D 180 video and I'm excited about the support coming from Apple with the iPhone and Vision Pro along with other brands releasing lenses and cameras, but I wonder if we'll be able to add overlay graphics to the live stream of this.
I think that most people that are doing any of this work right now for live compositing are using Touch Designer. So look at Touch Designer as far as doing that. I got to experiment with that next week. So I'm trying to figure some of those bits and pieces out for that and a variety of other things. But Touch Designer is kind of used by VJs a lot, but it also happens to be very popular. They've got a lot of tools inside of the virtual reality world. So check out Touch Designer. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia writes in, are any of the panelists using iOS 18.2 beta that came out yesterday?
I am, but so far I haven't seen any different than what I had before. So I'm sure that I've missed something, but
ChatGPT integration in Siri.
There we go. So I'll have to check. I'll have to play with that a little bit. I tried to get it installed last night, because I've got Mac break today, so I haven't seen it yet. Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois writes in, asking recommendations on best practices to use and your use of dongles in production for reliability. Laptop computers often require USB 3 dongles to connect HDMI outputs. Classroom settings, we find problems with handshake and even resolution sync.
Go, Courtney.
Yeah, one thing you might try is if you have a dongle that goes to DisplayPort, because the problem with HDMI is because HDCP has to be guaranteed on it or not supported on it. If it's not supported on it, a lot of times it'll either just go blank to a black screen if the copyright bit is set on whatever you're feeding out of your computer, or if you're hooking it up to, let's say, a game machine or a Blu-ray player, if you're trying to play some example, copyrighted video, HDCP coming out of the HDMI is going to mess you up. So if your DisplayPort doesn't support HDCP, so if you get a USB 3 to DisplayPort output, and then you might have to convert it again to get it back to HDMI, that way it'll kind of strip off the HDCP. But it is, kind of a mess. You're going a dongle into a dongle, and that's never a good idea, really.
Yeah, for the most part, I try to use USB-C to HDMI cables, and that you can get them up to about 10 feet. And I just use those. I try not to use I have a whole slew of dongles that I keep in my bag just in case, but I try not to use them because it's another area that, if you can get all the way there with a cable, you're better off. And the ones that I use I've bought a lot of these, and the Unis are the only ones that work reliably for me. So those are the only ones that I use at this point. The UNI, they're not particularly expensive. They fulfill one requirement that I have, which is they have to be woven exterior. I don't like the feel of regular cables, and so all of my cables are woven. I also, when I'm at an event, I always know which ones are mine because they're all woven. Almost nobody else does that. I find that to be the case. The one of the things that was mentioned by Mickey as well is you got to look for whether the EDID is correct and whether it's beyond HDCP. Is that the EDID is correct? I find with a lot of monitors you have to set it manually. And so in a Mac, for instance, you have to go in, and I think on the PC as well, you have to go in and say, specifically show me all the resolutions that are available. And then you oftentimes have to pick a frame rate that it can actually handle. So a lot of monitors can't handle 30 frames a second, or can't handle 60 frames a second, or can't handle 80 frames a second. You have to get to the one that it wants to be at and manually set it, as opposed to letting it do the automatic handshake. One more question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida writes in, Alex, return of the SM7B mic? Reason?
I'm learning what it does and doesn't do. We're using it for when we started doing more remotes with Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, and I just hadn't used the mic. I mean, I've used the SM7B a couple times in the last 10 years, and we decided that was going to be the mic that we wanted to use for those remotes. So for a variety of reasons, and I got two of them, and I'm using it so that I understand, its performance. So that's why we have this mic. That's it for today. I want to remind everybody that we do have t-shirts on sale. You can go to officehours.global/shop, and that helps keep the lights on and get you a t-shirt. You can also just go to officehours.global/donate and just give us money. We are a 501c3, so if you want to donate, that keeps all the servers paid for and everything rolling. So go ahead, but the shirts are cool. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, the really good conversation that we get to have every single day, and the producers, you're a big piece of that. And I asking all the great questions, and just keep on thinking about the things that you're wondering about. Write them down somewhere, throw them in. I want to thank the panelists. We can't do this without you. It really is an entirely different kind of show because we have a group of experts talking, not just a couple, and really answering all those questions. And I want to thank the incredible dev team. We are streaming at 4K right now. We'll soon be testing HDR. In fact, we're doing some test streaming to my other YouTube channels today. You'll probably see that go out publicly tomorrow. So that's kind of fun. But it's all, the dev team is working really hard to kind of keep moving forward. So I really want to thank everyone, both on the weekdays, on the Sunday teams, the extra hour team, the rundown team. There's lots of people that are integral to making this all possible, and we really appreciate everybody's contribution, both on the show and all the support pieces of the show. Now, if we had done this in person, the tall traversal is, if we had walked around and asked these questions in person, we would have traveled 29,000 miles today. That's 47,000 kilometers, and that is 227 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Question is, Alex, will the new shirts have a little string of bananas silk screened on the back by Alex's new silk screen set?
I think there will be some t-shirts that have to say bananas.
There will be some special editions with it all the way along the collar.
Yeah. We got to have t-shirts that have inside jokes that only we get.
Yeah, exactly.
For scale.
Silk screened by Alex Lindsay.
BFS, bananas for scale.
Bananas for scale, not small. It's 3/4 banana for scale.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right, thanks everybody.